On this Wednesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, we are talking big man shopping in the NBA playoffs for Memphis. We're going to react to a surprising omission from the Athletics player surveys, and we're also going to finally hear what Damichael Cole thinks about my anti-Reed Shepherd, anti-guard movement that I'm trying to start here on Locked On Grizzlies. The dynamic duo rides again. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax. Once again, my co-host, Damichael Cole, is with me. It is a good day for that reason and for that reason alone as you tune in. However you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. You should be liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing within the first minute or so of this show because Damichael Cole and I are back together. We are free and available as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Make sure you're checking us out on all those places where you can get podcasts. Make us a part of your Memphis Grizzlies and, of course, NBA content consumption experience. You know you want to. You know you love the show. You might as well just go full in if you haven't already done so and checking us out each and every time an episode drops. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Damichael, we are back together and it feels so good. I hope that you've enjoyed the little bit of a break. I appreciate you covering for me last week. Hopefully you've had a chance to watch some NBA basketball and you've gotten the opportunity to do some big man shopping like me. I talked about Isaiah Hartenstein a couple of episodes ago, and he may have just played himself out of the market if you're going game by game. He looked pretty good for New York in game 2.
He looked good, didn't he? I mean, played himself out of the market. It is definitely the way it's trending. The thing about Isaiah Hartenstein is you watch him play, and his skill set is pretty much very, very kind of prototypical of what the Grizzlies need and what the Grizzlies don't have. You know, bigger guy. He can rebound the ball well. I mean, we saw late in the game the big block he had. I think it was on Tyrese Maxey. He was driving to the rim late in that game. Game-saving, altering block. Moving his feet. I mean, there were several positions down the stretch where he was isolated with Tyrese Maxey in that game and held his own. And I'm just watching it, and I'm like, he fits. He fits, but you know what? Grizzlies probably weren't the only team watching thinking something like that. And the reason we can have this conversation about Hartenstein is simply because of the fact that I think unless you have a Jokic, unless you have an Embiid, Rudy Gobert, I guess, I mean, the proof is in the pudding with the $200+ million contract. I mean, unless you have...
Goodness gracious, the NBA players do not like Rudy Gobert.
And that's what we're going to get to a little bit later. And with all that being said, like, those guys have kind of proven why they deserve to be paid that way. For the most part, teams, I look at the center position like the running back position. You know, Jokic and Embiid, those are like the Christian McCaffreys. You know, those are the anomalies. And then there's everyone else where it feels like they're being undervalued despite the output that they're putting out there each and every year, you know, from a productivity standpoint. That's how the center position feels. So with that being said, the Knicks committed 4 years, $60 million, $15 million a year to Mitchell Robinson. I feel like Hartenstein will demand a similar salary. Is that sounds right in the ballpark of what he could command. And if that's the case, that's probably out of the Grizzlies' price range, unless there's a couple more moves made, you know, because the thing is, if you get him, which is what we'd have to talk about. Let's say hypothetically that Hartenstein puts it out there. I want to play with the Grizzlies. That's the team I want to go to. Tells his agent, line it up. If that's the case, there's going to have to be a sign and trade. There's going to have to be a sign and trade. So there are going to have to be more pieces involved. The Grizzlies are going to have to send out 125% salary, and I believe they'll have to get 110%, back or whatever the case may be, because, you know, they're close to the first apron and all that stuff. So it's a tough situation in order the idea of getting him. Like, that's going to be the most difficult part. And you kind of if you're a Grizzlies fan, you kind of root for Mitchell Robinson to kind of like take over the minutes for the remainder of this series, because it was trending that way. In game one, Mitchell Robinson got more of the minutes than Hartenstein, but game two, it was more Hartenstein. And I tell you what, I'm with you, Joe. If he continues to play at that level, 30 minutes, 14-8, the assists were there, 4 assists with the blocks and steals, we're not going to be talking about him as an option anymore.
Mitch Robb seems like somebody that makes a lot of sense for New York moving forward. In theory, he could help the Grizzlies as well. They still have to pay OG Anunoby. That's something I didn't talk about a couple of days ago. But that's a reality too. Money's going to get tight for everybody here soon. All these players getting all these paydays. They're going to have to make a decision, and maybe we just round back to fee, fi, fo, fum in the draft, and it's Donovan Clingan that gets picked in the middle of the lottery. But let's stay on the trade train here, right? We can still shopping, some window shopping. Maybe Hartenstein and Mitch Robb are not necessarily going to.
There are a couple other bigs that I like in the playoffs too.
Who are you thinking that our wonderful listeners and viewers should check out as these playoffs unfold that may be good fits in Memphis?
Yeah, see, since we're in the playoffs now, like the regular season guys, we'll talk about them later on in the summer, and we got all that. But it's good to zero in, because now as Grizzlies fans, you're watching the playoffs from a different perspective. Some of you just watch it for your personal enjoyment, and then some people, will watch it to say, oh, that's a guy that could fit. Oh, that guy could fit, things like that. And for those people, that's the Joe Mullinaxes of the world. For those people out there, I think you got to look at this Magic team, because right now they're down 2-0. They're down 2-0 in this series. I know the Magic in the Cavs series been getting a lot of flack because it's ugly basketball. Like it's not pretty for the eyes. But at the same time, you look at that Magic lineup. What did you notice? Jonathan Isaac, Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner. That's been the 3, 4, 5 for the majority, of these games. Basically, what I'm saying is they are almost like outlawing the center position on that team. And it's crazy because they have one of the deepest, if not the deepest, center rotation. They got 3, I think, bigs who could start on certain teams in the NBA at center. I wouldn't be surprised if Mo Wagner turned into a starter somewhere. Defensively, he has some limitations, but he can go average you double figures and put the ball in the cup. Goga Bitadze, that's another one. Defensively, very skilled. Offensively has more limitations there as well. And then Wendell Carter, he got traded there for a reason. And he has a sizable contract that's very similar to Brandon Clark's deal as well. So with all that being said, this is where I'm looking at some bargain shopping. Like let's say hypothetically, Joe, let's hypothetically speak here. Let's say the Grizzlies do draft, a center in the draft, and they get a guy. Hey, this is a guy we feel like we can, make our, be our starting center for years to come. I feel like now, especially, you talked about it on the recent episode about the Yuta Watanabe decision and kind of the effect that it has on the overall roster landscape. I think him opting out actually gives you the option of doubling down on the center position. You have that option to say, hey, we're going to draft this guy, and if we don't feel like he is quote unquote ready day one, go get a Goga Bitadze. That's the guy that I have my eyes on, because I'm looking at these first 2 playoff games. How many minutes did he play, Joe? He played a big donut. He played a big Krispy Kreme.
Not in the mix.
He's not in the mix. And the thing is, if you watch him, when he started this year, he was a productive player. Like, he was a part of some of their long winning streaks. I think he played 3 games of more than 30 minutes this season. In those 3 games, he averaged 8 points, 8.7 rebounds, 2.7 assists. And he rated as one of the better defenders as the center position, not just in those 3 games, but in, I think, a 26-game sample size when he played more than 20 minutes. So that's my case. I think Goga Bitadze makes sense from the standpoint of he'll be a free agent, and you can go get him at a very cheap number. And you're going to get defense. You're going to get rebounded. You don't really need him to score, so you're okay with the limits there.
I like Goga. I think that's a good option. I think you look at him as someone that doesn't need to be a scorer. He needs a screen. He needs a rebound, play defense. Keep that model going. And again, he has NBA experience. He can be a guy that if he wants to start a game, you can start him. If you want to put him out there as a reserve, you most certainly can. He's flexible. There's no ego really there. So I like that name, and that's a good team, the Magic in general, to keep an eye on as we go window shopping for bigs. Let Damichael and I know in the comments who maybe you have your eye on in these playoffs that is realistic. Everybody wants Nikola Jokic, right? But I'm pretty sure the Denver Nuggets aren't
Only one of that dude.
Yeah, only one of those. So when we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, a guy that was all over the athletic player survey, Victor Wembanyama. Players love that guy. I think he's pretty good at a young age. Somebody that wasn't there very much is going to be a major focus of our next segment here on Locked On Grizzlies. So stick around for that. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by DoorDash. Mom is worthy of celebration, and since they're a gift, we should be giving her the very best gifts on this Mother's Day. Get gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. Select from hundreds of expertly crafted boutique or bouquets to the best of tech and self-care essentials and more delivered right to her door. Does mom have a sweet tooth? Is she a tech enthusiast? Maybe she's a beauty connoisseur, a little bit outdoorsy. No matter what she's into, you can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout gear, and so much more. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order right now with the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by the good folks over at Monopoly Go. I don't know if you know this or not, Damichael, but I'm kind of competitive. I don't know if you agree with that or not. I can be a competitive guy, and I admit that I have that competitive side. We all do, right? My competitive side's a big fan of Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it by now if you're an everydayer here at Locked On Grizzlies. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. A great twist on Monopoly. You play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends like I can with Damichael when we get on the game. I can charge them rent on iconic properties, heist their vaults for riches all for myself, and the leaderboards will show me how I am the biggest Monopoly tycoon. It's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can also team up with friends and people all around the world in tournaments to get huge rewards. So get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go now on the App Store or Google Play. Again, Monopoly Go, big fan. Damichael, The Athletic comes out with a player survey every year, right? And as part of that player survey, there's surprises. Like we talked about Rudy Gobert a little bit a couple of times on this episode. The players definitely don't seem to like Rudy Gobert very much for whatever reason, right? He seems like a pretty good player, probably going to be the defensive player of the year. They like Victor Wembanyama. They've been impressed by him. Someone that for whatever reason they don't seem to like as much is Jaren Jackson Jr. And I had to go do a double take of the article when it came out. Jaren Jackson Jr., again, the award will be given out here in the next month or so, is currently the reigning, defending, undisputed defensive player of the year, right? And that time is coming to a close, but that's still his award. So surely he would have been listed on the best defensive players in the league. He's not. I don't think he was even in others receiving votes. Now, what might be the reason for that? I don't see Jaren as someone that the players don't like Rudy Gobert. I think Jaren is involved in the Players Association.
He is,
right?
Yeah.
So you don't get voted into that role if you're disliked. I think that's an important thing to understand. And again, he is the defensive player of the year. I know that there's an argument that the players make. They respect on-ball defenders, perimeter defenders. Like I think Drew Holiday finished second or third in the vote. They respect those types more than the bigs because usually they're the help defender. Guard or wing makes a mistake, they clean up the mess. But I still found it surprising that not many players, if any, responded in the survey. That's important to point out. Is a big fan of Jaren as a defensive player. Has he fallen off that much? I know in a recent episode you talked about how he was in your mix for second team all defense. Is that still the case in terms of the eyes of the players? Maybe not.
Yeah, I think if the players did an all defensive team, I don't know if he'd make it. And it's interesting because you pointed out a very important reason for that, in my opinion. Before I explain that reasoning, I do think that when you talk about likability, he's a very likable player around the league. You know, a lot of guys have really solid relationships with Jaren Jackson Jr. from the standpoint. I know you mentioned that he's involved, with the Players Association as a vice president. He's been voted into that. And he does a lot of great community things as well. So all that points to a guy that's a very likable player. It's not like Rudy Gobert. You don't see Rudy Gobert high-fiving and hugging a bunch of dudes after games too much like you do, with a Jaren Jackson Jr. because of his Michigan State guys and guys like Jordan Poole that he played in the preps with and things like that. So it's a little bit different. But with Jaren, I think what's similar when you talk about a Rudy Gobert and those type of guys is the fact that around the league, I feel like players really don't. I think respect is the right word. Players really don't respect the type of roles that those guys play because they're simple, but they're very effective roles. Like if you got to look at it from two lenses here. If you look at it from our lens, we're looking at the advanced numbers, the on-off numbers and things like that. Guys like Jaren and Rudy Gobert, they flourish at those numbers. When Jaren's on the floor, the Grizzlies' rim protection is this much better. The defensive rating is this much higher, all of that. But when you're a hooper, when you're out there on the floor, you're saying, oh, man, Jaren doesn't do anything. But, when you're playing the Pelicans and you see him guarding Herb Jones and he's just 2 feet in the paint trying to help out, on Zion and things like that half of the game. But when you're playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, he's sagging off of Josh Giddey and helping out when other guys go to the rim. As a player, ask yourself, would you really respect that as much, especially when you're one of the guys like Drew Holiday, Marcus Smart, when he won Defensive Player of the Year a couple years ago, or, Alex Caruso, who's probably going to be first or second team all defense this year. You're one of those guys who's running around 2 miles, it feels like, every single game, chasing Steph Curry, chasing Klay Thompson, chasing CJ McCollum, and running through 50 screens. You don't see Jaren running through many screens like that. You don't see Rudy Gobert running through. Rudy Gobert, for the most part of his career, has pretty much been a drop coverage guy. And in Minnesota, they've kind of shifted a little bit, like you've seen him, recently, like isolating guarding Kevin Durant, in that series and things like that. So he's kind of doing more in Minnesota than he did in Utah, it feels like, which is probably why he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year this year. But getting back to the point of Jaren, I think it's fair to wonder, like, the players really don't respect his role as much. I mean, we seen, kind of Draymond in the past on the podcast, he talk about, like how Jaren has the tendency to foul a lot and things like that. And that's not lost on players. Like, I've been in that Grizzlies locker room and they know certain guys around the league. They're like, oh yeah, that guy's a hack. That's what they call him. He's a hack. I'm sure there are plenty of guys around the league. They know when they play Jaren Jackson Jr. Oh yeah, he's going to foul you. He's going to foul you. So I think it's more of that than anything, and you may ask why Victor Wembanyama stands out, and it's because, well, he's averaging like a gazillion steals and blocks, and he's 7'4", on top of that. So I think just with bigs in general, those guards and wings, they don't respect those type of roles as much as coaches do and as much as we, the viewers, do when we're watching the games and we watch, the box score a little bit more than they do from the advanced perspective.
Yeah, the experience of Victor Wembanyama has to be quite something, right? You got a 7'4", 7'5" guy completely altering every shot. He's a game wrecker, whereas Jaren, Jaren at the 5 is a different beast from Jaren at the 4. We've talked about that before, and that's important to understand for sure. I think I get that from that perspective. If you're a hooper, like you said, you're going to put more on a guy like a Drew Holiday, a Marcus Smart, an Alex Caruso even, that takes that kind of responsibility more directly. So I think that's fair. And Jaren, obviously, from other players. Again, that's from the player survey for The Athletic. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will finish up this episode. On yesterday's show, I had a pretty aggressive anti-Reed Shepherd take that I'm guessing Damichael's not going to agree with, but I'm going to let him have the floor. I have a feeling I know where he's going to go with it, but I'm going to let him respond to because this is a co-hosted show. This isn't the Joe Mullinax show. This is Locked On Grizzlies, co-hosted by Joe Mullinax and Damichael Cole. I'm going to let him have his say next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, are you tired of all the yelling and screaming on Fox Sports and ESPN, having to turn down the volume all day? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA as well as the National Hockey League. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on one app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon right now and make your first bet an automatic win. Do it with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by BetterHelp. We all have things that we want to get off our chest. We have problems, sometimes small, sometimes big, but depending on the situation, all problems can be big. And BetterHelp is there to help you. I'm going to talk about a problem that I'm currently enduring. It's the fact that people continue to bring up Jonas Valanciunas like he wasn't inhibiting the growth of Desmond Bane, John Morant, and Jaren Jackson Jr. It's revisionist history, folks. But how important is that in the grand scheme of life when you have kids and a wife and all sorts of demands from your job? Do you really need to complain that much about Jonas Valanciunas? I'm a podcast host, so I guess I do. But it's wonderful to have the opportunity through BetterHelp to have therapy that can be different for everyone, whether our problems in our minds are big or small. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, Damichael, as promised, here's your opportunity. Here's your chance. On yesterday's episode, I basically, and I'm interested because I stood up for a Tennessee Vol.
You did.
Dalton Knecht. I said, I would have rather had old man Knecht than a Reed Shepherd. And I will admit, you're almost certainly going to disagree with my logic of he got cooked by Oakland. And maybe it's just me being salty because I had Kentucky in the championship or in the Final Four. And top five, apparently, NBA prospects got beat by the Oakland freaking Grizzlies.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe that's part of my frustration. But my argument yesterday was the Grizzlies need guys that can help them win now. Donovan Clingan or Zach Edey later in the draft. I want to stress that, not in the lottery. Zach Edey later in the draft, potentially. Those are bigs that, even if they're not starters, they can help Memphis win now. Dalton Knecht is a senior who has a body that is developed. He's ready to go. Even if it's in a 15 to 20-minute off-the-bench role, he can help them win now. I don't see that in Reed Shepherd right now, and I'm focused on right now because, as I've said time and again, I might get T-shirts made to Michael. Are we trying to win a championship or not? That is very much focused on this year, in fairness, and maybe you're still keeping that macro view of what Reed Shepherd could be for Memphis, not just this coming season, but in the years to come. And maybe it's not even Reed Shepherd. Maybe it's the other Kentucky guard that you're more interested in. So your overall takeaway from me being so anti-6'3" or shorter player for the Grizzlies in this upcoming draft.
Like, I get it, Joe. I do get it. I understand the perspective that you're coming from, but you know I can't. You know which way I'm going to lean on this. You already know.
Yeah, I know.
And and the reason here is, for one, I mean, I've talked about it a little bit, but the Grizzlies, even minus Yuta Watanabe, you got like 9 out of 15 roster guys who can pretty much play on the wing. Like, I mean, we talk about where somebody going to play at guard. Where in the world are they going to play if you add someone at shooting guard or small forward? Not playing in front of Vince Williams, probably. You're probably not going to play in front of Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, and G.G. Jackson, for that matter. And that doesn't even include, the Taylor Jenkins favorite, John Conchar. Like, that's his guy. So you're probably not going to play in front of John Conchar, too, because
I'm still hoping Conchar's not here when we're talking in September and October.
Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. So the thing is, on the wing, like, you talk about what would be, a wasted spot in a way. Adding a wing to a certain degree would kind of feel like that. At least for this upcoming season. I have made the point that he could go get a guy who could potentially be the de facto Luke Kennard replacement and, kind of, sit in the background this year and then get an elevated role next season when Luke Kennard potentially is a free agent or whatever the case may be, if that's the situation, if that's how this whole team option thing plays out. So I can see that as well. But getting to the idea of Reed Shepherd, he's an interesting, eval because of the fact that I'm, and I think a lot of these, talent evaluators, the first thing you're looking at is just how athletic guys are, now, because that's the NBA. If you go watch a EuroLeague basketball games, the skill, I don't think is much different from the NBA. Skill wise, you're going to see all the Euro steps. You're going to see the great footwork. You're going to see the step backs. You're going to see the side steps. You're going to see all the premier footwork and just fundamentally sound things. If you
I think you can make the argument, like a guy like a Luka Doncic, obviously other top players in NBA right now, being European or internationally born, you can make an argument the skill is even better. It's the athleticism that sets apart the American player at this stage from everybody else.
That's it. And not even just the American, but the NBA. Like, guys,
that's fair.
What stands out about the NBA is they want these guys with these 40-inch verticals. Guys are going to run up and down, because that's the game. The NBA is less about, the play calling and X's and O's and things like that. So getting back to Reed Sheppard, because that's how the Grizzlies play to a certain degree as well. That's why we have all the questions about the half-court offense. Reed Sheppard is an interesting eval because he doesn't have the 40-inch vertical. He doesn't have all these type things. I think it was Daily Memphis, right? Drew Hill, I think, was one of the people. But I heard, or maybe it was someone else. I don't want to throw Drew a light there, but I already said his name. So, but Drew, well, I do know this. I will say this: Drew is high on Reed Sheppard, as a prospect. And I've heard someone mention the idea that he kind of is like a Steve Nash type of prospect from smooth efficiency and those type of things. And I could see it because the guy shot over 50% in college from 3-point range. Like, that is incredible. Then the hands defensively. I'm very big on defensive hands because we saw with DeAnthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, Xavier Tillman, those type of guys. Marcus Smart now, in Memphis, like guys who have the tendency to quote unquote, oh, you beat me off the dribble, I'm just gonna stick my hand in here and get the ball, and now I'm right back in position. Or you think you got me beat, and then I'm just right in position to slap the ball out of your hands, whether it's on the ball, off the ball. Reed Sheppard was the best in college basketball this season with his hands on the defensive end. Instinctively on both offense and defense, he stands out. And those things translate automatically to the league. So I think from the point defensively, he could give you, that irritant. And he could give you some steals and things like that. We know the Grizzlies love shooting. Like, they need it still. Like, as much as how much I like Scottie Pippen Jr., and everyone should know that at this point. Scottie Pippen Jr. shot 41% from 3-point range. G.G. Jackson shot over 36% from 3-point range. Both of those guys, as good as those stretches were, just being honest here, neither of them have ever in their basketball lives shot that well from 3-point range. Neither one of them. Scottie Pippen's never been a 41% 3-point shooter. G.G. Jackson's never been a 36-37% 3-point shooter. With all that being said, you got to take what you saw there with just a grain. You can't take too much into it. And if you're not putting too much into it, you're saying, okay, we still need more shooting on the perimeter. And that's where Reed Sheppard comes in. I think there is value to what he brings defensively and from a shooting perspective as a guy who can play on and off the ball. Sign me up. If Reed Sheppard's on the board and those bigs aren't there, I'm not tripping if they go get him, Joe.
And those bigs aren't there. That was the key word, the key phrase. I'm paying attention, partner. You said, and those bigs aren't there. So just to be clear, okay,
that big isn't there.
That Donovan Clingan is still on the board, and for whatever reason, Reed Sheppard is also still on the board. We've talked about in the past how the NBA values athletic wings. Seems like there's a bevy of those. If for whatever reason Sheppard and Clingan are on the board, who are you going with at 7-8, wherever Memphis picks if they're in the middle of the lottery?
Clingan more than likely. Now, if he's still on the board, there may be some medical questions there if he's still on the board at that point. But if he's not, if everything clears there medically with him and whatnot, without a doubt, give me Donovan Clingan. And I think again, the fact that Utah made the decision that he did, you kind of double down on big. So I'm fine with drafting him and saying, hey, we'll go get another one too on top of adding him, in the front court.
I'm calling that a win. That's where we're going to end today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies, with Damichael and I agreeing on Donovan Clingan. Hashtag #FeeFiFoFum. When we come back on our Thursday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, Damichael, maybe we take another look around the NBA playoffs, not necessarily at bigs, but just players maybe that are shining, doing things we didn't necessarily anticipate. Maybe we start our player review series, maybe starting to look at a player or two, talking about what we liked about from their season, things they could do better the next time out. I think we can start that process here.
I love it.
We've
Yeah.
healed a little bit after the last week or so of the regular
Healed is-
season being done. Maybe we can start reflecting a little bit.
Yeah, it's almost that time, right? Like this next couple weeks will be perfect to get into that before we get to this draft lottery. It's going to come up on May 12th. And everything else that's going to come behind that, including the combine workouts. I might go up there, Joe. I might be in Chicago for that. So
I think you should. Chicago's a fun town.
Chicago's a fun town. I haven't been. That's one of the few NBA arenas that I've not been to. So might get up there for that as well. But anyways, that's beside the point. I think we definitely need to get into these player reviews. The question is, how many of them are we reviewing? Because there were 33 guys.
And we're going to have to talk about what the criteria is. That's a fact.
Yeah, for sure. But shout out to my guys, Jacob Gilliard and Deke Giroux. But I'll be just fine if we if we tell them they did well this season, and that's that.
You can rest now, like we said to Jaron the other day. But make sure you're sticking with Locked On Grizzlies. Plenty of content we're going to continue to talk about as the offseason moves along. Thank you so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Again, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can check out Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much to Damichael. It was wonderful being back together, partner. We'll catch everybody again next time here on Locked On Grizzlies, free and available wherever you get podcasts. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll catch you next time on Locked On Grizzlies.